Sorry about that. So the next founding father, the next notable figure we're looking at is Emil Durkheim, 1858 to 1917. Just a moment for that. So Emil Durkheim actually, in his own contribution, described focused on science, focusing on societal structures and norms. He advocated the use of systematic observation to study sociological events. But a very important thing that he did is that he recommended that sociologists should not just consider people's attitude when they are explaining society, but that it's very important for them to study what you call social facts. Social facts are like patterns of behavior, you know, that are characteristic of particular groups. That's very important for sociologists to focus on that and consider social facts in looking at how people behave and what people do. So he introduced several concepts. One of those concepts is what you call social facts, which also means patterns of behavior that are characteristics of particular group. He tried to also explain society or social solidarity by looking at making a distinction between what you call mechanical solidarity and organic solidarity. Mechanical solidarity is what is found in very simple societies where there's a collective consciousness.
Hello.
And that consciousness is based on shared beliefs, you know, and values. Whereas when you talk about organic solidarity is found in complex societies and is based more on interdependence, you know, from specialized roles. That's in terms of division of labor. So when we talk about organic solidarity, you actually can think of a place like a big city, for example, maybe like Lagos. How do people relate with one another? Would you really say that you have those, you have relationship based on those shared beliefs and values? Is that really a collective consciousness? I mean, comparing it with when you're talking about a small place, like a village, where the people would know one another and where their shared beliefs are strong, their values are strong, and there's this collective consciousness among the people. So it's trying to make a distinction, you know, between what you find in simple societies and in complex societies. Another notable thing that he's known for is the study of suicide. In his work, he tried to prove that suicide rates are influenced by certain things. For example, social integration, how well integrated people are. You know, if people believe in religion, their religious affiliation, their marital status, and things like that can influence the rate at which people commit suicide. It goes beyond psychology. You know, others have tried to explain suicide based on psychology and some other psychological principles. But he believed that when you look at suicide, his major explanation, which made the work very popular, is that suicide rates can be influenced by social integration and by societal regulation. These are the things that will influence whether people would commit suicide or not. His work, it's very important on that. Then the concept anomie is that is attributed to him. The concept of anomie, where you talk about a state of normlessness in society. We talk about a state of normlessness or social deregulation, which is coming from rapid societal change. Remember that he was also, influenced by all the period we're talking about. All of these founding fathers, we're talking about the state of anomie, the normlessness, the social disorder that resulted from the revolutions that we have mentioned. So trying to explain this anomie, he described it as a state of normlessness or social deregulation that can come from rapid societal change. So it was because as a result of these changes, that led to confusion and social breakdown. And he also showed this in a study of suicide. For part of his work, also very important, religion. He analyzed religion as a social phenomenon and believed that religion can actually reinforce, collective life because of the creation of shared symbols and rituals that would distinguish the sacred from the profane or from the mundane. So when you mention his name, you have all of these contributions that you need to refer to. These are the main things that Emil Durkheim will be remembered for. And he laid the foundation for functionalism, and social research. His work also later influenced other scholars. Then for Karl Marx, he was also responsible for a number of contributions that are relevant, to sociology. And his work has also influenced other people. Even though that Karl Marx was a very notable philosopher and economist, but some of the major things that he contributed to sociology is the conflict theory. He argued that society is not just about, it's not about harmony as far as Karl Marx is concerned, unlike people like Herbert Spencer, who believe that, it was possible to have harmony. Karl Marx argued that society is not about harmony, but about constant struggle. That there's always struggle between the various classes. I'm trying to see if it's possible to mute those who are distracting us. There's a lot of distraction. Thank you very much, host. So I was talking about Karl Marx and his argument that there's always constant struggle between various groups, or what you call classes, in society. And what's responsible for the constant struggle is because of the limited resources. So Karl Marx established conflict, as a core issue, in sociology. And through that conflict, you can look at society and explain what is going on in society. Particularly when you look at class conflict, and competition, Karl Marx identified two main classes in capitalism. He identified the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie are the owners of factors of production, the wealthy ones, those who own the land, who own the capital, etc. And the proletariat are those who are the workers who work for the bourgeoisie. And so the argument is that as a result of their various interests, their different interests, there would always be conflict between these two classes because their interests are basically different. And so there would always be conflict. The capitalists want to maximize profit. The proletariat are also agitating to have something worthwhile for their labor, which they hardly do. So Marx sees this as something that will continue. So he also proposed that the material conditions, what we're referring to as the economic production, will constantly shape society's structure. So that's why it refers to the economic as a base. So the economic base will always determine the societal superstructure. So when you're talking about the structure, we're talking about other things in society like the law, the politics, the culture of society. But Marx's argument is that the economic base, it will constantly, determine whatever will happen in other, in the society structure, in other aspects of society. And that this conflict will continue to happen as long as the forces of production will clash with existing relations. He also talked about the alienation of workers. And his main argument here is that capitalism separates the workers even from the products they make. It separates workers even from their fellow workers and from their own human potential. So they are alienated. They do not have any form of satisfaction, even though they are the ones doing this work. So, Karl Marx is credited with that. Karl Marx also described religion as the opium of the people, that religion kinds of make the people, gives them this idea that, they will have they have to look forward to their reward later, but it distracts them as an opium. It distracts them from the real world oppression. They do not understand that they are being oppressed because the religion becomes something that covers their oppression. They see it as, okay, well, we're working, the reward is somewhere in paradise, in heaven. So religion kind of deadens their understanding of the reality because it makes them to continue to work, and they even use it to justify the status quo. Their oppression, they do not understand as oppression. What they do, they do not understand as the fact that they have been exploited. And so religion becomes like the opium for the people that makes them to look forward to either their benefits or their own time of rest and enjoyment later on. But they keep working, for the capitalist. So he actually criticized religion a lot and said, referred to it as the opium of the people. So his foundational work provided critical tools to analyze power imbalance, in society. His work is also used to analyze exploitation and similar concepts in society. It was a foundational work that we're looking at. His work provided what you can refer to as radical alternative to functionalist theories. We're going to talk about functionalist theory later on when we mention the scholar responsible. But his work provided a radical alternative. And his work has been of tremendous influence, not just in sociology alone, even in economics, in political science, and critical studies, you find that Marx's work has been quite influential to all of that. Then we have Max Weber. Max Weber's work, sorry, just a moment. Sorry about that. I had to deal with a distraction here. So we're looking at Max Weber. Max Weber's contribution to sociology, we're going to see in a number of concepts that we're going to look at now. He actually introduced the concept of social action and referred to trying to explain it as focusing on understanding the subjective meaning behind individual action. You know, and he also went ahead categorize individual action as either goal rational or value rational. We're not going to go into details of that, but it's very important for us that we note that he introduced this concept of social action. And another emphasis that Max Weber made is that it's very important for sociologists to consider the interpretive understanding of meanings of individual behavior. In other words, it's not sufficient to just look at what people are doing or why people are behaving in a particular way, but it's very important to have an understanding, to inquire into people's thoughts and feelings and perception regarding their own behavior. So this is what he calls the interpretive understanding, or Verstehen. It's a German word, and it simply means understanding. So it's important to have an interpretive understanding of the meaning of individual behavior. Why do people behave, the way they behave? How can we understand the particular behavior? A key contribution of Max Weber is the analysis of the bureaucracy. He analyzed the bureaucracy as an efficient, rational system of organization. But he also warned, I think later on, we are still going to look at the ideal type bureaucracy, as advocated by Max Weber. But he later warned that even though the bureaucracy can be very efficient, a rational system of organization, it could be potentially dehumanizing, and there are certain negative things that come, from the rules, from the rigidity of the bureaucracy. Then through Max Weber's work, we also understand the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. What he has done here, is to argue that this particular brand of Christianity, Calvinism, that the rules, the behavior, how people behave what people follow, the ethic that people follow within Calvinism, can create a kind of work ethic that unintentionally, leads to a saving, investment, and make people more frugal. They are not involved in any form of ostentatious living or wasteful living, etc. So I believe that this Protestant ethic actually unintentionally, would contribute to the spirit of capitalism. And then it tries to, there's a concept, called Calvinist asceticism. This asceticism simply refers to the fact that they live in a particular kind of manner in which they're not wasteful, in which they are focused, and in which they kind of emphasize saving and investment, but not deliberately. By doing all of this, they are inadvertently promoting the rise of capitalism. That's what he meant by that. Then he also went on talking about rationalization and disenchantment, in which the important fact there is that the system of rationalizing, particularly in the modern society, seeing modernity as a process where tradition gives way. And once tradition has given way, it gives way to efficiency, it gives way to calculation and control. And this can lead one way or the other to a disenchanted world. As tradition is giving way, as tradition is breaking down, and society is becoming more efficient, and there's a lot of control, that can lead to a disenchanted world. Talks about social stratification, and this is not really original to him, was coming from Karl Marx's work on class, talking about stratification where people are put into different, they have different levels of, different statuses, different levels of prestige, different measures of power, etc. And that this would lead to various types of inequality. So this is more like distinct dimensions of inequality. And then also he identified what he called the ideal type of legitimate domination. When you talk about authority and domination, there are like three types of authority or legitimate authority. You have the traditional, the charismatic, and the legal rational. The legal rational is the one you find in the bureaucratic institutions. So, and Max Weber is also credited with the ideal type. The ideal type is just a methodological tool, for creating conceptual modes. So when he talks about the ideal type bureaucracy, he's talking about the bureaucracy, in its purest form. This is what you will get when you look at it in its purest form. I've also mentioned the concept of Festigen, which is talking about the interpretive understanding. So most of the lasting impact that Max Weber's work had in terms of economic sociology, have insight into a culture's role in economic development. You have the political sociology, there's an impact there, theories on power, authority, and modern governance. And his work was also important in organizational studies, like foundational for understanding modern society. Then because of that interpretive understanding that I talked about, his work is also important, later on for symbolic interactionism, where there's a focus on individual meaning. And later we'll still mention that. So we're just mentioning these few things about Max Weber. Then we have Herbert Spencer. Herbert Spencer actually sees society as a living organism, as a living organism. So that's why it's attributed to him as responsible for the organic ideology, where society is seen as a living organism. And like any other living organism, whatever happens, in one part of the organism will also affect another part of the organism. He's suggesting that, Albert Spencer suggested, and this is a part of the contribution to his work, is that when there's change in one part of society, it will cause change in other parts of the society. So his argument was that every part of society, will contribute to the stability of society. Just as if you have a living organism, every part of that organism would have to function. That if one part malfunctions, there will be unease in other parts. In other words, for any living organism, all the parts are interdependent. And that's exactly the same thing he's talking about in human society, that if one part of society malfunctions, other parts will also malfunction. It's like looking at family as an example, as a social institution. If there's a problem, within the family, it would also affect other parts of society, like what you'll find in schools, what you'll find in government, etc. That this would always affect one another. Then he also believed that society can actually correct its own problems, its own defects. That once you have a problem in society, that it can be corrected. It can correct its own problem by itself. Talking about social evolution, Albert Spencer proposed that societies would naturally, progress from simple homogeneous forms, like small societies, like primitive societies, and would progress naturally to become more complex, to complex or heterogeneous societies. That's a belief. And he was also the one who popularized this social Darwinism, actually coined it, coming from Charles Darwin's evolution theory, believe that could be applied to society. So he extended the evolutionary theory to human society, and talked about another important term, which is the survival of the fittest. And what it means by that is that there will be natural selection in society, and that natural selection will favor the fittest in society, whether the fittest individuals or the fittest groups in society, and that those ones, would survive. But his work has been criticized in the sense that the fittest is referring to socially the rich, the powerful, the successful, that they will enjoy their status, because nature has selected them to do so. Then in contrast to those ones, you have nature has made the unfit, the poor, the weak, the unsuccessful, kind of doomed them to failure, and that they need to fend for themselves without the social assistance of society if they must be healthy and if a society is to thrive. So in his own belief, government should not, interfere in society, that when government interferes in society, is interfering in the natural order of society. And definitely, his work has been criticized for justifying inequality, for justifying inequality and saying that some people are fit for society and some are not fit for society. And so in talking about these individualism, and laissez-faire, his argument was that there should be minimal state interference in social life, in economic life, because it could hinder the natural progress and the individual liberty. Still seeing it as a fact that nature has kind of, divided society and has made it possible for some to survive and some not to survive, and that anytime the government tries to interfere, tries to regulate society, that interference, is unnatural, and that it will cause disorder in society. Now, believes that societal improvement and complexity, that they are actually natural outcomes of adaptation and competition, and that they're not really coming from deliberate social um, engineering. I mentioned earlier that in terms of stages, society identified distinct stages that societies will move from the primitive, to advanced, or industrial societies. These are just a few of the contributions that Herbert Spencer made. In latter levels of study, you are going to study more in details and see his contributions to the biological argument, of in society, how he believes that the biological division in society can separate people, into what they should do and what they should be allowed to do and what they should not be um, allowed to do. We're going to see those arguments in later years as we move on in the study of sociology. Now, we're going to look at George Herbert Mead, because I think it's also important that we mention um, a few things about his work. He laid the groundwork for symbolic interactionism. It was his ideas, Mead's ideas, that laid the groundwork for symbolic interactionism as a perspective. And the basic thing is that this perspective says that society and individual actions, they're built on shared symbols, and that there are subjective interpretations. You focus on how people interpret the world. His work laid the foundation for this. His work is also very important when you talk about the theory of the self. When he developed that theory of the self, you talk about I, you talk about me, you talk about yourself representing the social self, and internalizing societal attitude, and expectations. That's when you talk about the me. The I is the spontaneous, active, and creative response, to the me and the social situation. And he argues that the self will emerge over time, through various stages, that the self is actually not present at birth. He also mentioned the generalized other, which is referring to the internalized attitudes, the expectations, and viewpoints of one's community or society, that these are very crucial for developing a self concept and for guiding behavior in society. You also argue that the language, which is also including significant symbols and gestures, that they're very important and they're central to developing self-consciousness and, the mind. That this would allow human beings to reflect, on themselves, and others. There is also the idea coming from his work on social behaviorism, and that's a framework that is used to explain how the mind, self, and communication will arise from social interaction, viewing the individual mind as a product of social act, not really isolated. Then when you take the role of the other, that's the ability to understand and interpret the perspectives of others. And this is essential for social interaction, particularly complex social interaction and self development. So it's Mead's work that actually shows that human experience of self and mind is fundamentally social. You know that in psychology also you talk about the mind and the self, but Mead's work shows that when you talk about the human experience of self and mind is fundamentally social, and it emerges from communication and interpretation of symbols within any particular community. So we consider another notable personality who's contributed to sociology. That's Tucker Parsons, and his major contributions to sociology. His contributions center on structural functionalism. In structural functionalism, views society as interconnected parts that are also working together for stability. That is also noted for his grand social system theory, where he used this the Agile schema, where A stands for adaptation, and G for goal attainment, I for integration, and L for latency. We're going to be dealing with all of these in details later, but he used this schema to explain societal needs, and he used it in alongside what he called the action theory, and also has the other concepts, that are related to Tucker Parsons' work, the SEEK rule. All of them are just aiming to create that comprehensive grand theory of society. So once you hear his name, Tucker Parsons, you're going to hear it severally as you continue your study of sociology, but these are the key things you're going to hear about him. The structural functionalism, looking at society as a complex system where various institutions, whether you're talking about the institution of the family, education, politics, etc., where they all perform vital roles that are very important to maintain order in society. They emphasized consensus, equilibrium. These are all things, because it's also coming from that perspective of looking at society, like an organism, like organism and the various parts will also be working together. So emphasize the idea of the shared norms, the values, and social cohesion in society. These are all the things that Tucker Parsons talks about. And in details, you look at it when you're talking about structural functionalism. Mention the schema that is used, that can be used in any society, just to explain like a framework to understand any system. Then also the action theory that focuses on individual actions within social context that will bridge the micro and the macro levels by analyzing the motivations of people, the roles and the norms, etc. And the SEEK rule, which I also mentioned, the defining the social expectations, what are the rights, what are the obligations, for the sick and those who are also caring for them. Also try to identify the fact that there is, illness itself is also social. There are certain ways of embracing and highlighting societal management of illness. Socialization is also another concept that it's important when you're looking at the work of Tucker Parsons. It give details of the process by which individuals will internalize societal norms and values, and that all of these are very important for to ensure maintain social order. All the consensus that we're talking about, of the agreement, the cooperation that is important for society, the value consensus, and everything. That it's very important that during socialization, people internalize those societal norms, those values that will be very important that will be very useful, for consensus and to maintain social order in society. When you study his work in details, you also see that Tucker Parsons' work has been also criticized a lot for being abstract and also playing down power struggles, inequality, and so on. But these are just a few things that he's known for. Remember that we're just opening into the course and just looking at the contributions that have been made by some individuals for the study of society. So we look at Robert K. Merton, and also influenced by other scholars. That's an important point for us to note, that some of the thinkers, or the pioneers we're looking at, their work, they're either influenced by earlier pioneers who are like people they had collaborated with, or their mentors, or those that had influenced them, just like their own work also, go ahead and influence those who are coming after them. So Robert K. Merton had also made a lot of contributions into to sociology, and a few of the concepts, some of the concepts we're going to mention now are identified with him. He refined functionalism. Remember when I mentioned Talcott Parsons, we talked about structural functionalism. But Robert K. Merton also refined functionalism, and it distinguished between a manifest function and latent function. And this distinction talks about manifest functions are those that are intended, the intended functions or consequences of any social action, but that the latent consequences or latent functions, those are the ones that are not intended, those unintended consequences of social action. We also talked about that it could come with some dysfunctions. That's the negative, the side effects of those actions. Then he advocated middle range theories. Theories are bridge the abstract grand theories and empirical research, so that from his work you could actually find that sociology will be more testable rather than the grand theories that may be that are usually abstract and empirical research. So this middle range theory that advocated make sociology, more testable. And he explained deviance has very serious contributions, towards deviance. He explained deviance as the fact that individuals are just seeking to adapt to societal pressure. That's through his strain theory, or the theory of anomie, trying to explain that when people get into deviant behavior, what they are just trying to do is that they are trying to adapt to societal pressure when they have tried to achieve legitimate goals, but those goals have remained unreachable, through legitimate means. And so they have to look for other means of achieving their goals. And he explained that some of these other means that they use will be conformity, innovation, ritualism, retreatism, and rebellion. All of these two you will still look at in details when you're talking about the strain theory. But it will suffice to remember that Robert K. Merton is the one who is credited with this concept and theory. He also contributed to social psychology, through his development of this concept. When you talk about the reference group theory, talk about the role theory, reference group theory, just talking about how individuals will evaluate their behavior, or how they evaluate themselves and their behavior, in relation to specific groups that they identify with. So when people identify with specific groups, those groups can become their reference groups. So they would evaluate themselves, subjectively, based on that group that they are evaluating themselves against, that particular group that is their reference group, the group that they want to identify with or that they already identify with. So they begin to evaluate themselves and their behavior in relation to those groups. Then for role theory, says that you analyze your role sets, analyze role set or multiple roles and role strains. These are conflicts within specific roles that people adopt, in society. Other concepts that are identified or associated with Robert K. Merton are the concepts like the self-fulfilling prophecy. So when you talk about a false belief that will become true, because people will act on it, associated with it, the role model, it's a very common, people use it even outside of sociology, talk about role model. When you're talking about an idealized person, somebody who serves like a standard for others, is also credited with that concept. And when you also talk about unintended consequences, I've mentioned that when you talk about the latent and the manifest functions. There are actions that can lead to unexpected outcomes. That's what it means by the unintended consequences. Another important concept traced to Robert K. Merton is focus groups, because he developed this particular, it's a research method. You are going to learn about it later, where you want to gather qualitative data from people in a group, where you can have a focus group. So it's a method of research, but he developed this method for, studying mass communication. And so his work provided a lot of foundation, for all of these concepts that we've talked about. They're like foundational concepts and frameworks that are used across sociology. So his work has been very illustrative, and important in the understanding of these, some of these concepts and theories that I have mentioned. So these are some of the few founding fathers or significant individuals that we're looking at when we're talking about introducing sociology. These are not all. There are several other names that you would find. There are several individuals that have actually contributed to sociology, but these are the few that we're talking about today. There are other ones that we can also read up about them, many that we're going to encounter as we go on in our study of sociology. So thank you very much. We'll hold on a while before we end the class.